Okay, so get ready because today we're diving into something pretty unique.
Yeah,
Necrobotics, have you heard of this?
I have.
So we're going to be talking about using deceased organisms as parts of robots,
Wow.
which I know it's a lot. It might sound like something straight out of science fiction, but it's a real field pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It is really fascinating. It blends biology and technology in such an unexpected way. We're really bridging this gap between life and death in a way. We're using nature's designs to create these innovative machines.
It's definitely a total mind bender. And it makes you think about the long history of humans interacting with the dead, like for scientific purposes, going way back.
Absolutely. And Jörg-Owe, whose work we're diving into today, actually points this out. He reminds us that studying anatomy using cadavers goes back centuries.
Yeah.
But what's different now is that we're not just observing the dead.
Right.
We're integrating them into functioning technologies.
That's where things get really interesting and maybe a bit unsettling. So how did we get from dissecting cadavers in the lab to actually incorporating them into robots? How did that leap happen?
Well, Necrobotics kind of grew out of fields like soft robotics and biohybrid systems.
Okay.
Scientists were looking for ways to, harness these unique properties of natural materials. For instance, spider silk.
Oh, yeah?
Incredibly strong and flexible. It's being used to create things like really delicate robotic grippers.
Wow.
And it takes advantage of the existing structure of the spider leg.
So instead of just trying to mimic nature, we're actually utilizing the real thing. It's wild.
Yeah, it is.
But I imagine there are some serious challenges in preserving these organisms and then making them functional parts of a robot. Like, how does that even work?
Exactly. Preservation techniques like freeze drying are really crucial.
Yeah.
To maintain that structural integrity of the biological material. But the real complexity comes in when you're integrating the robotic components, like sensors and actuators, into that preserved organism. It really requires a very deep understanding of both biology and engineering to make that happen.
I'm curious about the design process. Do researchers consider the ethical implications from the very start, or is it more of a let's build and see what happens approach?
Well, Jörg-Owe really stresses the need for responsible development throughout the entire process. He argues that ethical considerations should be woven into every stage, from sourcing the biological materials to designing the robot's functionality.
Right.
Where are these organisms coming from?
Yeah.
How are they being treated?
Right.
These aren't just afterthoughts. They need to be core principles guiding the research.
So it's not simply about scientific progress. It's about navigating a whole new set of ethical dilemmas, which is where this gets really interesting for me.
Absolutely.
We're not just talking about robots.
Yeah.
We're talking about the intersection of technology, ethics, our relationship with the natural world.
Right.
All of that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Necrobotics forces us to ask some pretty fundamental questions.
Sure.
What does it mean to use parts of once living beings in our machines? What are the potential consequences, intended and unintended? These are conversations that we need to have as this technology advances.
Yeah. I think our listeners are already buzzing with questions.
I bet.
But before we get to those, let's dig a little deeper into the specific techniques and methods used in necrobotics. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay, let's do that. One of the key aspects is understanding how scientists actually go about preserving these organisms for robotic applications.
Okay, let's start there, because before we can even begin to grasp the implications of all of this, we need to understand the nuts and bolts of how it actually works.
Right. Freeze drying is a common method, as I mentioned. It removes moisture, which prevents decay. But amazingly, it keeps the intricate structures intact.
Right.
You think about the delicate legs of a spider.
Yeah.
They need to remain flexible and strong even after preservation.
So it's not just about preventing it from, decomposing.
Right.
It's about preserving its functionality for its new role in a robot. It's pretty incredible.
Exactly. And researchers use other techniques, too.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes involving chemical treatments to further preserve those tissues. The goal is to maintain both the form and the function of the organism, essentially preparing it for its second life as part of a machine.
It's like giving these organisms a whole new purpose, almost a rebirth in a way.
It is a fascinating concept. And Jörg-Owe, in his work, he really delves into how this blurring of lines between life and death, between organic and artificial, raises these profound questions about our own relationship with technology and nature.
Okay, so we have the preserved organism now. How do scientists actually integrate those robotic components into it? It must be incredibly delicate work.
It is. Think microscopically small controllers, sensors, and actuators all carefully integrated into that preserved body. It requires a really deep understanding of both the biological structure and the engineering principles involved. Take that spider leg gripper example again.
Yeah.
Researchers replace the spider's muscles with tiny actuators,
Well,
allowing them to control the leg's movements electronically.
it's amazing to think that we can combine something as natural as a spider leg with cutting-edge robotics. But with this level of intricacy, it must present a huge challenge when it comes to, testing and data analysis.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, you're right. Researchers use qualitative content analysis to study how people respond to necrobotics and what their concerns are. This involves looking for patterns in user feedback, opinions, and even emotional responses.
So it's not just about building a functional robot.
Right.
It's also about understanding the human perception of this technology and addressing any potential ethical concerns.
Exactly. And Schneppat emphasizes.
Schneppat talks about this quite a bit.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Schneppat emphasizes that understanding public perception is really critical. User concerns often center around things like information needs.
Okay.
What do people need to know about necrobotics to feel comfortable with it?
Right.
There are also questions about perceptions of humanity. Does using parts of deceased organisms in robots somehow devalue life? And then you bring in the role of AI in all of this, which adds another layer of complexity.
Okay, so we've covered the history, the ethical considerations, the techniques involved. Now let's get to the really exciting part. What can we actually do with Necrobotics? What are the real-world applications?
This is where it gets really interesting, and Jörg-Owe Schneppat highlights a range of potential uses.
Yeah, give us some examples.
Yeah, for example, imagine remote surgical operations conducted with the precision and dexterity of these biohybrid robots.
Wow.
Surgeons could operate from miles away, potentially reaching patients in remote or disaster-stricken areas.
That sounds incredible, like something out of a sci-fi movie. But what about the risks? What if something goes wrong? Who's responsible?
Yeah, those are all valid concerns. And Schneppat acknowledges that patient safety and data security are paramount.
Of course.
We need robust systems to prevent hacking and ensure reliable communication between surgeon and robot.
So the technology is exciting, but the ethical and logistical challenges are huge. What other applications are being explored?
Well, Necrobotics could revolutionize delivery systems.
Okay.
We're talking optimized schedules, routes planned down to the minute, all thanks to advanced algorithms that factor in real-time traffic conditions, weather patterns, delivery priorities, you name it.
So instead of relying on human drivers, we could have these biohybrid robots zipping around delivering everything from packages to, who knows, maybe even pizza.
Exactly. And think about environmental applications.
Okay.
Necrobotics could be used to monitor ecosystems in distress, providing real-time data on pollution levels, plant health, you name it. We could even use them to assist with ecological recovery efforts, planting seeds or cleaning up contaminated areas.
It's fascinating to think that we could use technology inspired by nature to actually help heal nature.
It is a bit of a poetic irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Jörg-Owe Schneppat suggests that Necrobotics could play a really significant role in addressing environmental challenges, especially as climate change intensifies.
Okay, so we've got medical applications, delivery systems, environmental monitoring. What else?
Schneppat hints at even more futuristic applications.
Oh, wow.
Like using necrobotic principles in customizable manufacturing. Imagine 3D printing on a whole new level, using biohybrid systems to create tailor-made products that perfectly meet our needs. These could range from clothing to medical implants, each one personalized and optimized.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. It sounds like Necrobotics has the potential to impact nearly every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
But with such disruptive potential, we need to be extremely cautious about the downsides.
Absolutely.
What are the potential pitfalls we need to be aware of?
Privacy and surveillance are major concerns.
Okay.
These robots collect data, and we need to be very careful about how that information is stored, used, and protected.
Right.
Imagine a world where necrobots are used for surveillance.
Yeah.
Tracking our movements, monitoring our behavior. It's a chilling thought.
It is. It raises all sorts of questions about consent, transparency, and accountability. Who controls this data? How is it being used? These are fundamental questions that need to be addressed.
And then there are the ethical hurdles. We're in uncharted territory here.
Yeah.
There aren't clear guidelines or regulations in place for using deceased organisms in technology. How do we ensure that these organisms are treated with respect even in death? What are the boundaries that we shouldn't cross?
It feels like the science is sprinting ahead while the ethics are struggling to keep up.
Yeah.
And what about the impact on human jobs? Will robots, even biohybrid ones, eventually take over jobs that are currently done by people?
It's a valid concern. We need to be mindful of the potential for job displacement and think about ways to retrain and reskill the workforce as these technologies advance. We need to ensure that the benefits of necrobotics are shared equitably and that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in this changing world.
And of course, we can't forget the environmental impact.
Yeah.
Building and operating these robots requires energy and resources. We need to make sure that necrobotics isn't contributing to the very problems it's trying to solve.
Absolutely. Sustainability needs to be at the forefront of this field.
Yeah.
We need to consider the full life cycle of these robots, from the sourcing of materials to their eventual disposal, and minimize our ecological footprint.
So it sounds like necrobotics is this incredibly promising field, but also one that's fraught with challenges. Where do we go from here? What does the future hold?
Well, Jörg-Owe, in his essay, he offers some insightful thoughts on the future direction of necrobotics. He argues that continued research and development are crucial. We need to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible while ensuring that these advancements are ethical and sustainable.
So more funding for research collaboration between scientists, engineers, ethicists.
Exactly. We need to break down the silos between disciplines and foster a truly interdisciplinary approach to necrobotics.
And what about the ethical and regulatory challenges?
Yeah.
How do we create a framework for responsible development in such a new and complex field?
Schneppet suggests that we need clear guidelines, robust oversight, and open discussions about the moral implications of using deceased organisms and technology. We need to engage with the public, be transparent about the research, and address concerns head-on. He proposes the creation of ethical review boards specifically for necrobotics, bringing together experts from various fields to provide guidance and ensure ethical practices.
It sounds like we need a whole new set of rules for this brave new world of necrobotics. But rules alone aren't enough, are they?
Yeah.
We need a shift in mindset, a new way of thinking about our relationship with technology and the natural world.
You're absolutely right, and that's where societal engagement becomes vital. We can't develop this technology in a vacuum. We need public discourse, open forums where people can voice their concerns, ask questions, and help shape the direction of this field.
So not just scientists and policymakers, but everyday people need to be part of this conversation.
Exactly.
Because ultimately it's going to affect all of us.
Precisely. And finally, the role of funding and support is crucial. We need institutions, governments, and private investors to recognize the potential of necrobotics and provide the resources necessary to advance this field responsibly.
It sounds like the future of necrobotics is really a collective effort. Scientists, ethicists, policymakers, the public, we all have a role to play in shaping this technology and ensuring that it's used for good.
It is. It's about finding a balance between innovation and responsibility, between pushing the boundaries of what's possible and safeguarding our values.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From the fascinating, albeit slightly creepy concept of using deceased organisms in robots, to the mind-blowing potential applications and the very real ethical and societal challenges that come with it. It's a lot to digest.
It certainly is. And as we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with one final thought from Jörg-Owe.
Okay.
If we can successfully navigate these complex issues, what role do you think necrobotics should play in our future?
That's a question worth pondering. What do you think, dear listener? What kind of future do you want to see from necrobotics? We encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. Because the future of necrobotics, in many ways, is in our hands.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the fascinating and often unsettling world of necrobotics.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep diving deep, and most importantly, keep thinking critically about the world around you. So we've been exploring this world of necrobotics, a field that's both fascinating and ethically complex. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's time to really grapple with that question posed by Jörg-Owe. What role should necrobotics play in our future?
It's a question that requires careful consideration, weighing the potential benefits against the very real risks. But let's for a moment imagine a future where those ethical concerns are addressed, where we've established clear guidelines and safeguards. What could a world with responsible necrobotics look like?
Okay, I'll play along. In medicine, we already talked about remote surgical procedures, but maybe Necrobots could also assist in disaster relief efforts. Imagine them navigating through rubble after an earthquake, searching for survivors in places too dangerous for humans to reach.
Precisely. Their ability to move through challenging terrain, combined with these sensitive sensors, could make them invaluable in those situations. And think about wildlife conservation. We could use Necrobots to monitor endangered species without disrupting their habitats, collecting valuable data on their behavior and movements.
It's interesting how this unique blend of biology and technology could offer solutions to these real-world problems. It's almost like they could bridge the gap between humans and the natural world in a way that's not currently possible.
That's a really insightful point. And Schneppat touches on the potential for Necrobotics to play a role in environmental remediation as well. Imagine biohybrid robots designed to clean up oil spills or remove pollutants from contaminated soil. They could even be used to plant trees in areas affected by deforestation.
So it's not just about replacing humans, it's about creating tools that can work alongside us, extending our reach and capabilities in ways that benefit both humanity and the planet.
Exactly. But it's crucial to remember that this vision of a future where Necrobotics is a force for good hinges on those ethical considerations we keep coming back to.
Absolutely. Transparency and sourcing respect for the organisms, used clear guidelines and regulations, and an open dialogue with the public. Those are all essential. We can't just assume that the benefits will outweigh the risks. We need to actively work to ensure that Necrobotics is developed and used responsibly.
I completely agree. And we need to be mindful of the potential societal impacts as well. We can't ignore the concerns about job displacement. If Necrobots become commonplace, how will that affect human employment? Will certain jobs become obsolete? These are tough questions that we need to address as a society.
It's a lot to grapple with. But I think it's a conversation we need to have because, like it or not, Necrobotics is on the horizon. The technology is advancing rapidly, and it has the potential to change our world in some really profound ways.
And the choices we make now, the ethical framework that we establish, will determine what that future looks like. Will it be a future where Necrobotics is used for good to solve problems and improve lives? Or will it be a future where we've crossed ethical lines with unintended consequences that we can't foresee?
That's the big question, isn't it? And ultimately, it's up to all of us to decide, to stay informed, to engage in these conversations, to demand that Necrobotics, like any powerful technology, is developed and used ethically.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we urge you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going, because the future of Necrobotics in many ways is in our hands.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of Necrobotics.
Until next time, stay curious.